Series 5 of the Grassroots Series, Regional Distribution and Sales. My name is Brooke Sauer and I'm the expert in residence at Cicada Grow Lab and founder and director of IntellectAg. So we're going to talk a little bit today about distribution and sales, and I'm going to bring in two different people today to help support that, but to support this series. One is Duncan Abbey from Westonfence, who is a founder and also a farmer of an ag tech company. And then also Greg Crawford from DLL, who actually sort of tackle the same distribution challenges and things that we're going to talk about, but from a different perspective, more as a potential strategic partner or investor in companies. So a distribution strategy is really a method of disseminating your product to the end user. And a really good, efficient distribution strategy should identify points of revenue and retaining revenue, as well as creating and retaining customer loyalty. I guess at the end of the day, it's a proposed engagement with your ideal customer. And it can be either indirect or direct. And and this just depends. The strategy type depends on how effectively you can sell or support with or without your team with your product. Obviously, a direct strategy is where you would sell to the farmer directly yourself, and your farmer is not the only option for a customer, but I'm going to use farmer as a potential end user or your customer just as a point of reference and some continuity throughout this presentation. Or you engage like a wholesaler to become a distributor or a retailer for you, who then sells and possibly provides a certain amount of support of your product on your behalf. I guess the things that you need to consider, or a very quick question about whether to go towards a direct or an indirect distribution path, would be to consider whether your product is more of a routine purchase, which is probably unlikely in the ag tech market. It's more likely to be a specialized product or service that requires an element of sales support around it in terms of engaging with the customer, and then some level of ongoing support moving forward. So I spoke in an earlier series in number 3 called Getting Tight with Farmers. And given that we're using farmers as our end customer or our particular user for your piece of technology, I think it would be really worthwhile, if you haven't already seen that, to go and have a look at that series 3 session as well. But I guess essentially, farmers, for example, are quite conservative and cautious, and so are retailers as well, particularly in the agricultural networks. And I don't think it makes any difference which industry they're supporting, be it grains or, or the fish or the chicken industry. A lot of business relationships are built over time based on trust and loyalty. And a lot of farmers tend to have, very specific retailers that they engage with on a regular basis, be it for very specific products. So this can be quite an advantageous thing when thinking about your distribution networks as well, either in a very indirect distribution method using a retailer or a distribution partner, but also thinking probably if you're going to go more of a direct route, in sort of maybe leveraging some partnerships with certain retailers without a formal contract in place as well. So it's really important to also remember that a lot of the distribution networks are not really digitized in terms of online sales and things like that. And their business relationships are very much conducted on a face-to-face basis and built on strong and lasting relationships. So when thinking about, I guess, creating a distribution path, that's something to really consider, that you need to be able to either create very quickly a strong relationship, potentially built on an element of loyalty that can be built on over time if you're looking at more of a direct sort of distribution. But if not, if you're looking at a more of an indirect distribution because it suits your business model a little better, you want to choose somebody, a potential partner who already has a really strong and loyal customer base as well. So many things to think about. I guess when we're thinking about a direct distribution, there's both considerations and positives, around both methods. So let's just focus a little bit on a direct distribution channel. I guess, some of the considerations is that you probably need to go and do quite a lot of due diligence yourself about identifying what your ideal customer is, how they think, how they like to be engaged, how you are going to support them, how you're going to keep the rest of your business afloat while actually trying to drive that business and engagement with customers yourself. And, what is going to be the most ideal selling method for you? There are many ag tech products out there that do really well in an online environment. But if you're, if yours is a kind of product that requires a certain amount of face-to-face support, do you have the manpower within your team or within yourself to be able to create and maintain that level of face-to-face support, or even just at a selling method? Obviously, you will need to create and build your own reputation from scratch, and that takes time and is not easy to build, especially in a short period of time if you're trying to get to the market super quickly. You need to be patient and build upon that in a really probably in a really fast-paced way, but not to a point that you're actually not delivering a certain amount of customer service that may be required around your product. So you're going to have to establish connections and a clientele base all on your own. And that's hard work and takes a fair bit of pounding the pavement and getting out there, getting in front of potential customers, end users in a variety of different ways. And one thing to keep in mind, and I say this respectfully, but with a lack of reputation in the market too, it will reduce your ability to really rapidly penetrate the market and get really quick traction. So that's something to consider as well, not to deter you from going down a direct distribution path, because many companies have done it really successfully, but it's not without a wicked amount of hard work and literally pounding the pavement. So just something to be considering. On the positive side of things, if you're running your own distribution network as well, you remain being autonomous. You're not tied to any particular partner, which means that you can pick and choose who you work with at any given point in time. And you yourself is wholly and solely responsible for any customer satisfaction, which can be incredibly empowering when developing your business as well, and encouraging with the with more with ongoing traction and stuff like that. So, and of course, the most common one is that you get to retain all of those profits for yourself without having to do some sort of a cost sharing. When we're looking down an indirect distribution method, again, some considerations and some positives for both. So considerations would be that some distribution partners will expect a certain amount of exclusivity or selective preference in terms of times. And this is not always a negative thing. So it's not something to be completely frowned upon, because it will sort of maybe give them a bit of an edge being exclusive to, and it might make them work a little harder for their dollar. Some other considerations might be is, what is their ideal selling method? Again, is it face-to-face? And when you're thinking about if it's a requirement of selling your product to have a face-to-face with an ongoing level of support, and in terms of the sales, are you prepared to provide some support and some training to that distribution partner so that you're on the same page about the important points around your product, the important sales pitches around your product, what level of support is expected and required, and probably more than anything, does the culture or does that company share the same level of culture? Are they as passionate as you are? And do they have staff and enough staff with a bigger distribution reach to be able to effectively achieve what you want to achieve or can't possibly achieve in a direct fashion, that complements, I guess, the cost to you and your profits? And one big thing that Duncan, Abbey from Westonfence discussed with me was stepping away from the customer a little bit and getting that little bit further away. And it wasn't necessarily a negative thing, but he did sort of mention to me, and as do many other, other companies that I've spoken to with regards to global distribution, is stepping away from the customer is sometimes a little bit of a challenging thing to do, that you're putting your full trust and faith in another company to be acting on your behalf in your best interest. So that's something that you really need to think about as well. Some of the positives, I guess, of having an industry, or a distribution partner rather than an indirect distribution pathway, but is that if you choose your partner really well, they're going to have a really nice, neat packaged access to your ideal customer. They're obviously going to reduce the need for you to have larger teams as well, so you can sort of keep your team to a smaller, more focused, and maybe focus your efforts on manufacturing or other aspects of the business that you do really, really well. And obviously a good distribution partner is going to have optimal locations with really great understanding of who your ideal customer is, their known habits, their preferences, and how best to engage with them on a regular basis. And not only that, but you're having access to clients automatically without needing to pound the pavement, deliver or develop a reputation, and building on trust, which always takes a lot of time. A good distribution partner should be able to leverage both of those things, being reputation and trust, to engage with that ideal customer right from the get-go. So next we're going to hear from Greg Crawford from DLL, who's the National Manager for Food and Agribusiness. So DLL are a finance partner or the finance partner arm of Rabobank, and work really closely with quite a few ag tech startups around Australia, providing a bit of finance backing, but also some support as well. So we'll touch base again after our session with Greg. And Greg really talks a lot about how, as a potential partner or a finance partner for a scale up, and what sorts of things that they look for, particularly in distribution plans within a company that they're looking to partner with. So I think he's a great asset to have to this session, and brings a wealth of knowledge and experience.
Are you able to talk a little bit about your partnership with Swarm Farm or another ag tech founder?
Yeah, we've partnered with a lot of startups. One of the key things that we look at is how advanced the startup is with what they are taking to market and how they're going to market. And also, if they're manufacturing stuff to take to market, what that looks like. So, for example, if they're taking a machine to market, where's that machine being manufactured? How many can it take? Can it understand growth, and can it sustain growth if the product takes off? Because you don't want to make up 100 on day one and then only sell 2, but neither do you want to sell 100 and only have made 2. So it's a bit of a thought process that they definitely need to go through. And one of the other thing is a key point, especially in a country like Australia, is your distribution points and where that is. And then you've got to keep in mind also your product, what's competing with it out there, and how advanced is it or not advanced, and where is it being marketed from and through. So there's a few things there that you need to keep in the back of your mind as a startup on how that's going to go. And one of the other key things we look at is what they've done in market research is about asking their potential customers what they want to see, what they want out of something like that. So not just have your own thought process on what the customer's going to need, actually ask the customer what they're going to need, so you have some idea of where that's going to pan out, and have you develop something that's going to be taken to the market and the market's going to accept.
Yeah. So Greg, in your experience, just speaking on that distribution and really understanding that global market, I guess, and what their needs are going to be today, tomorrow, and into the future. What sort of things, if you are, I guess, walking into a partnership with a potential company like this, what sort of key things do you sort of look at to say that somebody's ticked that box? Is it a really thorough plan? Is it a really good understanding? Can you be a bit more specific about what sorts of things?
It's all of those, Brooke. It's a key thorough plan from way to go. It's a real key. They got the financial backing to be able to handle any growth and expected growth, and how that's going to be paid for, and what their available lines to fund that sort of growth is going to be. That's one of the really key points. It's also, has their product been tested and pushed through, especially in Australia and New Zealand, where we've got pretty exhaustive quality and safety and all those sorts of things that you've got to think about. they've got to make sure that all that's been done and ticked off. And I even see that in my role at the Tractor Machinery Association, where new entrants to the country, have to go through a rigorous process of proving their equipment is safe, reliable, and up to Australian standards. So there's some going through right now for sprayers that are being looked at, and they haven't been in this country before. They've come out and they're on trials in various farms in Western Australia and New South Wales and Queensland, just to try and, we don't want to, especially with sprayers, you've got to take into account what happens if there's drift. Who's liable for that drift if it happens, and what's in place to make sure it doesn't happen. The same with your robotics. How many hours of testing has been done on this to make sure it doesn't go rogue and go through a fence and hit a school bus? There's these sorts of things you've got to keep in the back of your mind that, sure, it might not happen, but the potential of it is there to happen, and what would happen after that if that was an event that would happen. So, tips over, drops its payload into a creek, and then you've got an environmental issue. So there's all these things about what you're manufacturing, what the technology is that you're taking to the environment, especially with that stuff that you get where you're automating things to move with technology. So there's no actual person physically in the driver's seat making sure I've got the foot on the brake if something goes wrong. So that's one of the key things on that side of technology. And then you've got the things like the cattle tags with the virtual fencing. So what's going to happen? We always look at what's going to happen if the fence doesn't work. You still got me?
I have now. Yeah, sorry, little glitch there.
Yeah, so what happens if the virtual fence doesn't work and all the cows get out and eat the next door neighbour's wheat crop? There's all those things, and we want to make sure that all those instances are taken into account when we talk to a startup. So so I guess financial backing, proof of concept, and what are all the risks being taken into account to go forward. So, but we get touch on a lot of things. So right from, as I said, the virtual fencing, the robots, robotic milking machines, right the way through to all the cow tags and collars, which sort of just give farmers a better avenue to what's happening with the cow, how far they walked, how much they ate, all these health things when the best time to do whatever with them is on. So certainly there's a lot more of that coming into the marketplace on a pretty regular basis. We get contacted most weeks of the year with new concepts, especially around technology and monitoring of animals and yield mapping and so forth for cropping, whether that be by planting or harvesting. So it's through that whole cycle, just everyone trying to create more yield and profitability with less inputs costs. So we compete better. And Australia, as I said, Australia around the world, Australia and New Zealand are really early adopters of technology compared to places like even the US.
Yeah, okay, that's a really interesting concept, because some of the early stage ag tech founders that I work with really kind of struggle to get a little bit of traction in those regional areas, particularly, not necessarily to sell a concept or sell their product, but even just being able to engage with farmers at a regional level to test, even just at a really low ad hoc level, to test out different concepts and things like that. So I think that's, I find it quite interesting to hear how Australia is really progressive in terms of adoption of ag tech in comparison to other countries. So that's a really, really interesting thing.
And you see that even in our...
Sorry?
You see that even in the tractor spec when they build the tractors. So most of the tractors introduced to Australia are built in Europe or America, England. And the specs required for Australia are far higher than what they would use on your normal Joe Blow farmer in America. It's just amazing. Like they still are, just a basically rear power takeoff and a drawbar in America still, whereas we have all sorts of stuff, easy takeoff, all this stuff on our tractors here, and all the yield mapping inside, whereas Americans still just run a cab with a steering wheel and a gear stick, and that's just about them done. So it's really crazy how they haven't really taken to technology. It's still about big and moving stuff, but not about so much about what they're growing, because they get subsidised by the government, so they don't really have that emphasis on trying to get the best return they can for the input that they put into it, because the government's subsidising their crop anyway, so it makes it a little bit different. So yeah, that's one of the key differences. That's why Australians are early adopters of technology, whether it be by GPS, field mapping, robots, robot milking machines, cow collars, all that stuff. We sort of grasp it quicker than anyone else around the world.
So, Greg, would it be fair to say that if you can prove out, I guess, from a manufacturing process that your product is meets specs, then it's probably a hurdle that you don't necessarily need to meet for other countries when going to a global market then? To as much consideration
if you
in Australia.
started here and take it anywhere else, you probably, I think Australia and New Zealand probably have the toughest regulations, biosecurity, safety precautions than anywhere else. So if you can survive here and get your machine up and running, you can certainly take that around the world. And we've seen some small companies in Australia that have taken their business and set up manufacturing places in the States and gone forward and done some great things that they haven't been able to do here. And they've come out of regional areas in sort of Cowra or Dubbo or anywhere like that. So.
Yeah, okay. Greg, can you talk a little bit about, getting a bit of traction regionally in relationship to, I guess, in relation to some of the partnerships that you have? Is there things that you would suggest young entrepreneurs or early stage entrepreneurs to do, or is there some avenues that you can suggest to help them get a bit of traction and get a bit of feedback?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of pounding the pavement involved in this. And if I take my mind back to when DLL started and we took a new way of financing to the marketplace, we had to sell a concept that was due to the Australian environment way back then when we partnered up with a few distributors in Australia, and we sort of together we drove around the countryside pressing the flesh everywhere to build up an introducer group of dealers. So that would be one of the key things, is to just get yourself out there and identify, do your work and look at your major centres, Dubbo, Tamworth, Moree, Narrabri, sort of, and then find out who you better. So you pick whether you've got, if you're technology and you're a startup, what's it do? Is it go on a tractor for yield mapping? Does it go around a cow's neck for health control, or does it go into virtual fencing, or all of those things? So you look to dealers or resellers in those areas who have the potential to take your equipment on and then market it themselves. So you've got to in Australia, the marketing, we don't have sort of individual groups who sell apart from sort of irrigation sort of stuff, but the rest of them, anything associated with GPS technology or yield mapping technology, all seems to come with either a tractor seller or a planter seller, one of those guys. So get in there, knock on the door, explain what you've got, and gauge the interest from that. And then there's a lot of stuff, a lot of industry groups like the Tractor Machinery Association gets involved heavily in that. You can get onto that. They have an annual conference. Obviously, COVID's sort of put to that, but in the normal world, you have an annual conference, and that's a great way to get your startup. You can get a half an hour slide at the conference to identify and display what you've got to the group, which is a group of dealers and distributors and manufacturers from around the country, all in the same room for a day. So you can do that sort of thing. But certainly it's identify and get in front of people, because trying to do it by an email or a Zoom call is probably not going to cut it as well as getting in front of them and just basically knocking on doors like the old way of selling your product.
So we kind of need COVID to disappear so that these young entrepreneurs can kind of pound the pavement a little bit.
So we get back to doing that job, yes. I'm not sure that's going to happen.
All right, if you're in Western Australia, they're their own little country over there. So.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I just have a third question for you, Greg, before we sign off. You were talking a little bit about distribution networks, if you had a machinery-based product, for example, and going and touching base with, local machinery dealers in key regional areas. How important is that, like a really strong distribution path, as opposed to, for example, going to, just say we've got something that's an add-on to a machine, to a yield monitor or something. Let's keep it really simple. How much better off would I be to be partnering with, say, the likes of our local case dealership is Kenway and Clark? I'll give them a little bit of plug nationally for them. So how important is it to you as a potential partner to have a partnership with them as opposed to, say, going alone and being less agnostic and being less brand specific, and trying to create, I guess, a self-righteous distribution path on your own?
Yeah, sure, Brooke. The key point of having a quality distributor or dealer is you've got a bit of fallback position if times get tough. Whereas if you go to a smaller one, are they going to survive the next drought? Because that's with Australia, you're going to get a drought, at some point, probably more so in the near future than the long term. That's one of the key points. And we've seen ourselves, like, I've got examples of distributors bringing in their tractor from manufactured in Europe, push it through a particular channel of a group of dealers, and it does nothing, goes nowhere. So they up and change and find a different group with a different way to market, and bang, all of a sudden it goes from selling 100 units to 1,000 units, sort of thing. So it's it can be as simple as that. But with all the technology that you're working with, it's best to identify someone who has an avenue to sell that or attach that to their tractor. And especially if you've got, the main brand tractors, your John Deere's, your Case, those guys, New Holland, they're the market leaders. That's where you want to attach yourself if you've got something that goes into their cabin or on the back of their machine and it works the best with their stuff.
Okay, that's really interesting. I'm working with a founder at the moment, and we are kind of going through this motion of, actually, do we try and steer this ship on our own and be a little bit brand non-specific, I guess? I mean, it's not machine related at all. Or do we go, straight to the top of the tree and look for a high-end distribution that would have global reach right at the beginning? And it's kind of interesting that I was probably tending to lean a little more towards the conservative side, and the founders are probably reaching for the stars. So I find it really interesting to talk to you particularly about that. So, okay.
Just another thing to keep in mind is when you've got the technology and you've made your play and you want to enter the market, there's also the possibility that one of the main players might see that and put in an offer and put an offer to buy to take them out of play altogether. So people have also got to decide whether, hey, we're in this for the long haul, no matter what money's splashed at us to buy this technology from me. Because if, say for us, and we want to partner up and finance the end product for the end user, we invest that time and money, and we want to make sure we've got a long-term partnership. So we don't want to do a lot of work and then all of a sudden that AI gets used up and someone just comes in and buys it, and the partner we had goes away, and they just becomes someone else's a much bigger concerns show and just gets absorbed then into the world of the big end of town.
Yeah, okay. So I guess in summary, Greg, in just a few words, the key points that I got from you was to, one, obviously have a really good plan on how to attack a market regionally here in Australia by using some really good, strong distribution partners. Obviously having a huge amount of due diligence and understanding the liability of your product really well and addressing all of those concerns, meeting specs within here in Australia before even remotely thinking about going anywhere. And on that note, if you are manufacturing here in Australia, you've probably likely cleared those hoops for most other countries. And then obviously having a good, strong manufacturing arm as well that is going to be able to ride through things like COVID and ensure that you're going to meet your potential market for small and as you grow exponentially as well. And obviously having a strong financier behind you to ensure that seamless production. So they're the key things that you guys would look at when taking on a partner.
No, that's absolutely right, Brooke.
Well, thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate your time. So this is Greg Crawford from DLL, who is the National Sales Manager for Food and Agribusiness. Thank you so much for your time, Greg. And we'll be talking to you again soon.
Thanks so much, Greg, for your input. I think having a quite a corporate sort of approach to this topic is really valuable to any potential founders out there as well. And it just gives a different edge on things that a potential partner, particularly a finance partner, would be looking for to ensure that you've ticked these boxes and understand a really appropriate distribution method for your product and getting in front of customers as well moving forward. So on the back of that, I just wanted to touch a little bit more on some of the challenges and things to be wary of as well when creating a distribution pathway, particularly in a regional network as well. So obviously, regional Australia, you're going to have some massive geographical challenges to overcome, irrespective of whether or not you're using a distribution partner or you're going it on your own boat. But getting about, Australia and in front of customers, building relationships, creating trust and maintaining those relationships via a support network is going to be time consuming. So getting from A to B, farm to farm, realistically, you need to consider how you're going to do that in a geographically well spread customer base. So, another thing to consider as well is our lack of digital infrastructure. A majority of regional areas have very limited 4G network in terms of mobile phones. A good proportion are still on the 3G network, which is really data unfriendly. If we do have 4G network, it's probably not well spread across the entire farm and probably confined to the homestead. Very few farms would be on the NBN network in the true sense of the word. A majority of the nodes are confined to the town limits, and once you get beyond the 80-kilometre side, that is where the NBN in its fibrous state ends. So on farm, the best sort of connectivity that we have in terms of internet connection is via satellite, which is often expensive and very much capped in the amount of data that's usable on a month-by-month basis. So, any kind of network that's required to run your product correctly and delivering a level of online type support, that will need to be seriously considered as well. So, when you're creating your product as well, it's something to consider that an offline version may be required with a syncing capability when it comes back into connection. But probably from a distribution perspective as well, how you manage that to create a level of customer support and rapport needs to be considered as well. Obviously, I spoke a lot about digital literacy and readiness for the industry in the Series 3 of Getting Tight with the Farmer. And I won't go into too much detail on this at all, but it is something to be considered, particularly around distribution as well, and how you are potentially going to be driving your own distribution throughout regional Australia. So it's not a big deal, but maybe keeping in mind as well that that digital literacy level is quite low within the agricultural sector, not just with farmers, but across the whole entire industry. And I guess understanding where technology fits on farm or within a specific business is sometimes a little bit difficult to get your head around, particularly because I guess agriculture has been around for a really long time, well before the hype of ag tech. So that is something to keep true and central to yourself and at the forefront of your plan as well, is how best to engage with people, particularly when I guess their readiness to understand or their literacy to understand how that piece of technology creates efficiency or an increase in productivity might be a little low. When looking at potential ag partners, you need to consider what in-house policies they may actually have. So, is there a lack of willingness to support other businesses that, despite how conducive it might be to their core business, it adds another element of complication, I guess, to an already sort of quite diverse and dynamic retail type system. So, and you want to consider, where the synergy lies. Is the synergy, a good distribution partnership needs to be synergistic for both and where there's a great deal of willingness and trust to come together for the greater good and also for mutual benefit. Also, in thinking about ag partners, and we're going to talk to Duncan Abbey shortly, and he really talks a lot about culture and the culture of your potential distribution partner and sharing that culture with you. I mean, you have spent a huge amount of time potentially, or will spend a huge amount of time developing a certain amount of culture of what's important in terms of engaging with customers, how best to use your product. You've already identified really clearly who your customer is. And what challenges or pain points you are helping to solve with your product. So ensuring that you, when choosing an ag partner, whether it is for a full distribution partnership or even just a simple partnership as well to gain a bit of traction, that you want to ensure that you share the same sort of culture and same sort of values, I guess, around sales and support. So some of the other distribution challenges that you have, or other ways in which you can actually get traction, might involve some trials. They're often slow, risky, and not very friendly to your investors as well, because they take so long to execute, get results, and then build traction on. Because essentially the main reason that you would want to do a trial is to prove to your target audience that your technology does what it's intended to do, and I guess really drive home how your technology can help solve a problem or a challenge or a pain point for a farmer. You know, the other thing to consider is that, seasonally, seasons can shape up really nicely at the beginning, but end disastrously towards the end. And that can be across any ag tech vertical or any ag vertical that you can think of. So that needs to be sort of probably considered too if you're using a trial method and pounding the pavement, engaging with farmers in a really real-time, field-based way. Think about the impact that some seasonal, less than favorable seasons is going to have on the ability for you to get traction within the market as well. And another thing that Duncan talks really strongly about, and I'll introduce him shortly, what are your key strengths within your own business? Are you really, really good at the marketing side of things? In which case, maybe you should be running your own sort of distribution network, thinking, the short-term goals, getting regional traction, and then a national traction, and then, of course, thinking on a global market as well. But if your strengths are more in the manufacturing side of things, or even the development of technology over time and continuing to build your product and sister products so that you're consistently engaging your audience in new and different ways and creating more loyalty, then you need to think about how's the best way for me to get my product in front of customers. So these are all things to think about, none of which I think there is a sweet spot answer for. And I think it really comes down to identifying probably some of the different challenges and then working out the best way for you to solve some of these challenges while still creating a really, really clear and concise path to market and how best for you to get traction, get traction with potential customers. So, on that note, I guess distribution networks don't always need a corporate partner. So Duncan Abbey talks a little bit about having, a really great relationship with a corporate partner like Gallagher. But, I guess a really good distribution network doesn't necessarily need to involve, a contract with a corporate. It can be simple as just getting started with a smaller agribusiness, having a really great partnership with just a single individual as well, with a like-minded, well-connected person who can actually get you in front of just a handful of farmers that might help, one, to validate your idea, but two, help to identify how best to engage with that ideal customer. There's quite a few good startups and Fluorosat for one. I helped Fluorosat at a very early stage just to, get them to They worked with us on a really close basis, and sometimes just to validate their product, but then also to sort of create some trials and get them directly in front of customers. Now, I don't think that was their full distribution strategy right from the get-go, but it certainly helped them to create a more direct distribution channel moving forward as well. So obviously, if you are, when you're thinking about this distribution pathway as well, marketing is the key, and social media can be highly powerful as well. At the end of the day, this is about getting traction. It's about building a reputation, building trust, and slowly building a client customer base, which will exponentially grow with positive traction. So, another option might be, depending on what sort of a product you have, is looking into some sort of a consignment arrangement just with a retailer that doesn't necessarily create exclusivity or partnership agreements, but allowing your stock to sit on shelves as well. And that's just another way of getting your product into the market. It's probably not as effective in terms of creating traction and sales as some of the other methods, but it's definitely worth a look at as well. And I've seen a few sort of startup companies who probably haven't had the capacity to go into an agreement, just get, their product in front of customers in a few different ways by having, some very simple retail agreements with consignment-based stock. Obviously, nothing will get past you pounding the pavement, really getting to field days, the large, large machinery field days, trying to engage with as many customers as possible, and forging, I guess, your own path to market just by direct relationships with customers as well. Small farmer-orientated field days can be highly, highly effective if done really well and given the opportunity to showcase your product or your service, or how it might work to demonstrate the efficacy of your product as well, and just have that opportunity to network with farmers. I talk quite a lot in Series 3 about how farmers, the ideal sort of learning platform is for farmer-to-farmer learning, and they spend a huge amount of time chatting with each other about different ideas, different concepts. But post a field day, particularly a tech-orientated field day, there's always quite a big buzz, where a lot of farmers kind of get together and say, oh, I really like this about this, and I didn't really get this, or I don't really understand that. And they're all questions that they wouldn't necessarily put their hand up in front of you to ask about. But a good, well-structured field day can promote a huge amount of discussion post that day and create a little bit of momentum of which you can then follow up with as well. So, and obviously sort of getting in front of agronomists as a potential sort of partner as well, particularly if it's a more of a service orientated product that you're selling. Do as many demonstrations as you possibly can within regional areas, building on existing field days, building on, as part of a bigger, conference or a seminar series, large machinery field days, small in-field field days, R&D field days as well. There's lots of opportunities if you can create just one or two good connections with, an agronomist or a scientist or something like that. Might even just be able to get your foot in the door at some point to get in front of a small audience. And then it doesn't take long for word to spread. The ag community is incredibly small here in Australia, to then sort of get invited to something else or continue to make connections with other people to forge out a different sort of distribution network. But I can't emphasize enough that if you're going down the direct method, that it is going to take time and energy, and there are quite a few challenges that you need to logistically manage to create an effective direct distribution pathway. So on that note, I'd really love to give you the opportunity to listen to my interview that I had with Duncan Abbey. To give it from a founder's perspective, Duncan is also a farmer, so he speaks really nicely about and really honest and frankly about how they probably have a bit of an unfair advantage because they are also farmers and already have a really good network of other like-minded farmers around their area, but how he would potentially do things if he wasn't a farmer himself or already in that industry. you know, they have a distribution partnership with Gallagher, and he's really open and honest about the things that were important to them about choosing or why they decided to use a distribution partner. And he's also got some really great tidbits of information right at the end for budding entrepreneurs. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope that you get at least one piece of information that helps you to decide how best to create some distribution, particularly in regional Australia areas. And that both Duncan and Greg have given you some little bit of insight in how to build on that distribution pathway when thinking about global networks. So thanks again, and here's Duncan. So thank you, Duncan, Abbey, for joining us again in the Grassroots series. Duncan joined us a little bit on the Getting Tight with Farmer session as well, and gave us some really great insights about how best to engage with farmers. And I've asked Duncan to join us again on this distribution and sales series as well, with the Westonfence product and how it's developed over time, and using a distribution partner as well. I thought Duncan could, you know, give us some really valuable insights on creating distribution pathways, particularly in a regional area, and thinking more globally into the future. So thank you again, Duncan, for your time. So appreciative of your advice and your help for these series. Duncan, can you tell me a little bit about your motivation to work really closely with a distribution partner, as opposed to going more of a direct and a regional opportunity, going it alone essentially? Why choose a distribution partner as opposed to having a crack yourselves?
Well, I guess we're a little bit of both. We initially were going alone, but we found we got to a level where it was bigger than you know, the infrastructure we had around us. We were an on-farm manufacturing business. We were quite remote, so logistically it was a challenge to get raw material in, you know, and finished goods out. We also we struggled with getting reliable labour to run the factory, so you know, it was left to our own devices, and it was a conflict with our core business, which was farming. So you know, that led to us getting behind in orders and not being able to service the customer adequately. So we had to make some decisions. So I guess the decisions that are put forward or pop up are, you know, do you engage in a distributor to help you with the marketing side of it? Do you engage with a manufacturer who can manufacture the product, and you take on the marketing side of the business? Do you sell the business? You know, has it got to a stage where you know, it's something that it's big enough and of value to someone else? So you know, that could be a consideration. But you know, in the end, I guess we chose to engage in a distributor, you know, because our skill sets were around the manufacturing, and you know, less so in the marketing side of the equation. And you know, there's some certain costs in taking that next step. You know, scaling is hard. It's not something to be taken lightly. It's if you think about putting just one salesman on the road, it's a $200,000 investment. You know, standalone premises to operate from. You know, there's rents that have to be paid every week. There's salaries and wages. There's investment in you know, further manufacturing to ensure that you can service any demands you might create. So you can't be everything. So we chose to go down the distribution path and engage Gallagher to help us to get our product out there.
Yeah. And on that note, Duncan, can you elaborate about the specific qualities that you were looking for in a distribution partner? You know, was it the reach and reputation or the reliability? You've already talked about it made much better financial sense for you guys to engage with a distribution partner, focus purely on the manufacturing and I guess that quality control within manufacturing yourself. So, were there specific things or attributes that you were looking for in a distribution partner that led you to choose Gallagher?
It's a good question, and it's a big decision because being a family business, your heart and soul's been put into a product for many years, and you're about to bring a third party in. It's a huge decision. So the things we looked at was the culture of the organisation. It's really important that they share similar values. They have the passion that you have, and the drive and the get up and go to get out there and promote your product in the right way. So that's a really critical one for us. Then we looked at what sort of sales footprint they have. The access to the actual market. The Gallagher who we chose were in over 1,300 stores around the country, which is massive. You then look at the people that they have, the number of people they have to service the stores who are creating the leads. Gallagher has got a substantial sales team on the ground, and then just what's within those people. Have they got that same culture, the motivation, the drive, the passion, and understanding of the farmers, pinch points, and where they can help the farmer is really critical. And then I guess the other one was the commercial fit. Is your potential distribution partner, do they understand the market that you're in? We're in fencing and electric fencing, so it was pretty important to us that our distribution partner had a presence in that market. What presence I think is critical. Are they a market leader? Are they the trusted people of knowledge in that area? It's really important that you do your homework on who you're going into business with, because things like culture and just their general sales ability and commercial fit are really important.
Yeah. On that note, Duncan, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to take a little bit of a sidestep here that we hadn't pre-discussed, but I was going to ask you if what sort of things you needed to invest in yourselves. Like once you'd made a decision on that distribution partner as well, I think I mentioned it in the previous series that you contributed to, that my husband is a huge fan of your product and sells it quite a lot throughout our regional area as well. But did you have to invest a little bit of time in terms of training your distribution partner, particularly around your product and how I guess you wanted it to be, the perks of it and what the selling points of it were? Is there any other additional advice that once you've picked the distribution partner, I guess there's still this active relationship ongoing too, and continual training would that be fair to say?
Oh, absolutely. It's and it's probably something we underestimated, with our product, was how much training was and still is required, for people to fully. It's one thing to understand it, but then to be confident enough to be able to deliver the features and benefits of any product, I guess, is it's another thing altogether. I mean, from our point of view, we invested in our own in-house training, and in our presentation skills and our ability to get our message across, and have that empathy that we need, but also have the confidence in the product is really critical, because if you're not confident in your product, and you're trying to impart your knowledge on your distribution partner first and foremostly, who then may have to go to a retail outlet and impart that knowledge, who then has to pass that on to the farmer. If there's any lack of confidence in that whole chain of events, well, it just falls over and people just say, oh, this is too hard. just go back to the old way, or you know, so it really is critical to get out with the distribution partners firstly, but then get out with all the reseller groups and hold training days, build fences, you know, have you know, sessions on the fence where you explain the features and benefits and you know, don't overcomplicate it. You know, it really is a simple system. You know, we do three things. You know, we do internal subdivision, we do exclusion, and we do retrofit fences, and it's as simple as that. I mean, there's 20 different products within that. But if you started talking about all those individual products, you lose the audience. But you know, when you're talking to a farmer, they're the three situations that more often than not will come up. He's got an issue with feral animals. He's got some country that he wants to subdivide for livestock control, or he's already got fences that are in good condition, but he's getting some feral pressure, and how can we help him? That's the three things. So just to be able to get in front of your sales network and to be able to, you know, dumb it down's not a, you know, I don't like to use that, like it, but you really don't want to overcomplicate things. You just need to have a simple way of getting a really important message across.
Yeah. So it's almost, I guess, about like selling the vision, isn't it, rather than the individual components?
Yes, that's right. You know, sell the concept, or you know, what are the payback? What is the payback on this? You know, and that's critical. You know, if a farmer can see that by spending a little bit, he's going to gain a lot, well, more often than not, you're going to get the sale.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I sort of help lots of founders out and sort of say, you know, farmers are not adverse to taking up technology. They're not, you know, serial non-adopters by any means, but that opportunity needs to be more beneficial to take the technology up than to not. And that's generally where a lot of people will invest. Yeah. And so I guess, you know, understanding where your technology fits into the grand scheme of an overall farming system, and like you said before, you know, it really identifies what that pinch point is, or the low-hanging fruit, and provides a very nice, neat and comfortable solution to an existing problem. That's generally when technology will be taken up by a farmer. So Duncan, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to throw you another little curveball question, and I think it will be quite simple for you to answer. Hopefully you won't kill me for asking you this, but you talked a little bit about how you had to, you know, invest in your own, you know, ability to get up there and sell your product as well. I remember, you know, as, you know, a fairly fresh graduate, and the first time I ever had to speak at a conference, I was absolutely packing my decks in front of, you know, 400 or 500 people. The lights were blinding my eyes. But, you know, since then you know, I did a lot of public speaking at school, but still nothing really quite prepares you for jumping in front of a big bunch of farmers who are quite literally looking at you like with this blank look on their face going, righto, come on, tell me what you're going to tell me then. I can understand it's incredibly overwhelming. So what did you sort of do to help kind of overcome a little bit of that, to help build, I guess, that rapport with farmers and help build your own distribution network and a sales network? You know, what did you invest in yourself to make yourself feel more comfortable?
Oh, look, we take it very seriously, the you know, the presentation, you know, because again, I don't like to use old sayings, but you know, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. So you know, you really need to you know, be on your game. I liken it to sport in some regards. You know, if you're going to a field day, you know, you got to be thinking about it on the way there. You know, what's the message? You know, what's going on out, you know, at the back of Moree, where they're getting, you know, massive incursions of kangaroos, and you know, have a look at the environment on the way out and just understand what's going on. But you know, to answer your question, you know, we've invested in training. You know, I'll plug Michelle Bowden does a presentation skills training course that, you know, it's not it's a fair bit of investment, but it's well worth it. She really, hones your skills in being able to step through a presentation succinctly and ensure your message is loud and clear and concise. But we've over the years spent money or invested money in consultants, to come in and have a look at our business and to help us, in our marketing endeavours. So it's really important that, no one will sell the product as well as you, but you need to be able to impart those skills and key points in a way that resonates with people, and that they can then go on and sell your product for you, or if we're talking to the farmers, then they understand your product and can make decisions around investing in it.
Yeah, for sure. Duncan, you mentioned to me once before that you had to, I guess, get a little way down the track and pivot a little bit to ensure that your sort of distribution pathway was still on track and on plan, and part of that was to do with the manufacturing side of things and quality control. Can you elaborate on that a little more?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. We invested when we first went into distribution with a distribution partner. We invested in technology that enabled us to produce, because the last thing we wanted to do is to engage with a sales team and then not be able to deliver on products. So we invested, in the technology to increase production. But that interestingly created a few little internal issues around the more efficient you get, the less people you've got for people to do. So, we to some extent outsmarted ourselves there. And so then we had to look at other ways. And in the back of our mind, we always wanted to manufacture our own plastic. So we investigated that fairly heavily as a result of, we had a bit of free time on our hands. And yeah, again, further investment was required, but to be able to bring our recycling of our raw materials in-house and be able to do all of that and control the quality and the quantities required is a great result of us pivoting, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. As a business owner myself, I've sort of come down the pathway a little bit and found myself having to pivot to a certain degree or change direction, mostly as a consequence of not really thinking big enough and not a lot of forward planning when I first went out into business on my own. What are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to a founder, with respect to distribution and I guess, and potentially a global market into the future? What's 3 things that you've learned along the way that you could, help a founder out with?
That's a good question. I think the key things that we look, would give advice on is understanding your customer and understanding what's happening in their environment and how you can fill the void of any issues that they're having out in the marketplace, and you need to be able to fill it quickly, easily, and cost competitively. So I think that's really important. I think understanding yourself and as a business and what you want to achieve and what your strengths are. If I can give an example, our strength was in manufacturing, less so in marketing. So we chose to go down the distribution model because of that, and I guess it's critical that you understand what your strengths are and what you want the business to look like in terms of where you fit in the business. You can't, or most people can't do everything, so you need to concentrate on one side of the business and bring appropriate skills and resources in to make the business more rounded. And I guess, you know, the third one is the capital required, you know, to achieve your goals is pretty critical. How are you going to fund it? You know, who, you know, ideally, you know, the less shareholders you can bring into a business, the less conformance and hassle that you'll have. But you know, sometimes that's not possible. You need investors, but then, you know, what's the culture of anyone that you bring in? Because again, that's pretty critical, because you might find your business heading in a direction you don't want it because of financial pressure or etc. So yeah, understand your capabilities and yeah, gear up accordingly, I guess.
Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Duncan. So that wraps up our Grassroots series, and I'd really love to take this opportunity to thank Duncan, Abbey from Westonfence for sharing some really valuable information, particularly around distribution and networking. So thank you, Duncan.
Yeah, no worries. No, thanks for inviting me on, and good luck to all the budding entrepreneurs out there. Yeah, I wish them well.
Thanks, Duncan.